Здравствуйте, товарищи. Welcome back to Russian Through Propaganda, or Russian Through Poems and Paintings. We're on day 103, and so yesterday we looked at the major noun types, masculine, feminine, neuter, hard and soft, plus feminine e-nouns, which are a very important sort of subclass of feminine nouns. And so today we're going to wrap up our review of nouns by looking at some sort of special cases and issues. We're going to start today by looking at a painting called the Утро стрелецкой казни, the morning of the execution of the Strelцы. A strelец was a member of one of these rifle regiments. You could call them maybe a rifleman or a musketeer, or the Strelцы. I guess people, I think in history books, they normally are just called by their Russian name, Strelцы. So anyway, like a lot of the paintings in this book, some of the paintings are kind of obscure, like that one feeding the chickens. That's not really a famous painting, but a lot of them, in fact, the vast majority, I would say, are very well known. And again, most of the famous ones are in either the Tretyakovka in Moscow or the Rусский Музей in Petersburg. And hopefully, if you go to one of those museums after going through this course, you'll recognize a lot of the paintings and know what's going on and enjoy them a little bit more. But also, they'll, a lot of them illustrate either major events in Russian history or major historical figures and things like this. So you can learn, we'll learn a lot about Russian history and culture as we go through our grammar. So anyway, this event is at this so-called Lobное место. That's what we see here. And it's still there in Moscow today, right in front of the Собор Василия Блаженного, right, St. Basil's Cathedral, the Cathedral of Basil, the Blessed, or Vasily Blаженный, who was a holy fool, by the way. And so anyway, this place, the Lobное место, is this kind of circular stone enclosure. And I think I've heard every once in a while you'll hear that, well, this is where they had executions on Red Square. But that's not really true as far as I know. And indeed, there's a plaque on the side of it that says as much. I think one reason for this misconception is that this adjective lobное место, it's used kind of in some historical sense. It doesn't make sense to translate it literally anymore. But the root there is lob, which means the head or the brow. And so for that reason, I think people think, oh, maybe they decapitated people there or something. But anyway, the inscription on the side of the little stone wall there. It's a little bit hard to read, but it says Lobное место, that is this Lobное место, this place, right? Служило для объявления государственных актов. So it served for the declaration or the announcement of state acts. Объявление войны или мира, declarations of war or peace. Оглашение указов о налогах, announcements or again declarations, making public of something, of an ukaz. An ukaz is a word, it's kind of a notorious word. You hear it thrown around a lot, even in, again, English language history texts, like as sort of a fiat from the Tsar, right? An ukaz is this kind of declaration that you had to just sort of make peace with. Anyway, an ukaz about taxes, налоги, указов о казнях, которые совершались не на лобном месте, а на Красной площади на специальных деревянных помостах. Okay, and declarations or announcements of executions. An execution is a казнь, that's in the title of the painting, right? Announcements of or declarations of executions which took place not on Lobное место, but on Red Square, on special wooden risers or scaffolds. Right, so anyway, and we see from the painting that you see the scaffolds being set up down sort of behind from where we're viewing, behind the cathedral, on this sort of slope that heads down from Red Square towards the Moskva-reka, right, towards the Moscow River. And so in the painting here, I forgot to say, what are we talking about here? So these riflemen staged a little revolt when Pyotr Veliki, right, Peter the Great, Peter the First, was still a very young Tsar. He had actually ascended the throne when he was very young, but there was a regency. Sophia ruled in his stead as his regent until he came of age. And then when he actually became Tsar, he faced this sort of test of his power very quickly. And so he put down this revolt very viciously, right? He had all these people executed, the streltsy, these riflemen. And this is suggestive of one major reason why he decided to move the capital from Moscow and actually build an entirely new city, St. Petersburg, and of course move the capital there. Uh, there were other reasons. A big one was to create a new port city to challenge Swedish power up in the Baltic. Sweden was a major naval power at that time, to build a navy in the first place and to create a truly Russian empire, and also to Europeanize Russia, right? Petersburg was envisioned as a European city, and with that came wholesale adaptation of Western customs, dress. Men had to shave off their old Russian-style beards, and so much changed in Russia. And this is really the turning point from old medieval Russia, Muscovy, old Rus, as it was called, to modern Russia, right? The Russian Empire, the Российская империя, and so forth. So anyway, we're going to learn about this painting here as we review some other issues with nouns. Okay, so before we turn to our first grammar topic, let's just get some vocab related to the painting. And again, look over these mock dictionary entries and see if you know what we're dealing with here. An uprising is a vastanie, special soft neuter. A rifleman is a strelets, right? That's a hard masculine. You see with a mobile vowel, the genitive is going to be streltsa. The nominative plural will be streltsy. And note how we're writing a soft sign there to preserve the softness of the L, even when the mobile vowel is removed. Vlast, power, that's a feminine noun. Tsar, that's a soft masculine, right? And that's pretty obvious if we know the meaning of tsar. We know that it refers to a male ruler, and so we can guess that that is grammatically masculine. Kazn, execution, that's a feminine noun. Vidin, vidna, look at this word, what's that? Well, there is a long form of this adjective vidny, but this is one of those adjectives that's used quite commonly in its short form. So this is a short form adjective that we're giving here. Something is visible. Sprava, sleva, those are adverbs, just meaning to the right, to the left. Konь, okay, that's a horse or a steed. And we see the genitive there is kanya. That's telling us that's a masculine, a soft masculine noun. Zloy is evil or angry. If you're angry at someone, that's zloy na kogo with the accusative in Russian. Zlost, enmity or hatred. Okay, that's a feminine noun. Ploshchid, that's a feminine noun. Now, of course, with some of these, if you're not sure, is that masculine or feminine, sometimes some clues in a given sentence can help you. And with ploshchid, we have an obvious example here today. Where are we? Well, krasnaya ploshchid, right? Krasnaya ploshchid is telling you the adjective krasnaya is that little clue you need to realize that, okay, ploshchid is indeed a feminine noun, right? Мы сегодня на Красной площади. We are on Red Square. Kreml, the Kremlin, as we know, is masculine. Kreml. Neshastny is unfortunate or wretched. Death, smерть. Okay, that's a feminine noun, as is жизнь, feminine noun. Okay, so let's look this over one more time. This is such a confusing thing that it's worth revisiting very quickly. If we see a noun ending in a soft sign, what could we possibly be dealing with? As we saw yesterday, it's either a soft masculine noun with just the soft version of ordinary hard masculine endings, or it could be a feminine noun. All nouns are feminine, right? So if we're talking noun, we see again one of these nouns with its genitive in the E, right? Nominative singular ending in a soft sign, genitive singular ending in E. We know that's an noun. We know that it's feminine, and there again are the endings. The only possible exception to that is the noun put, which is a funny little noun. It basically works as an e noun. Look over those endings, right? Everything looks just like the e noun endings, like with tetrads, except for the masculine instrumental, which is putiom, right? That looks a lot more like a soft masculine instrumental. And indeed, this is a masculine noun. So this is this one weird, think of it as an irregular noun that is basically an E noun, but it is masculine and it does have this one exceptional ending. Okay, so let's fill in some nouns ending in soft signs and be careful to think, okay, what is it? Now again, if we're just given the word in a list here with no clues, we have to simply know what it is. Is it a masculine soft or a feminine E noun? Okay, so let's work with площадь, square. We're standing on red square. From the square are visible a church and the Kremlin, right? A compound subject there. Мы стоим где? На Красной площади. Площади, right? There's that E noun ending. From, okay, площадь, by the way, is a noun, right? It's a big flat space. So from the square, that's an откуда phrase. We need the genitive с площади. С площади видны храм и Кремль. Два, цар. Okay, that's masculine, obviously. Sprava, on the right, we see the young Tsar, Peter I, that is, Peter the Great. Sprava, мы видим кого. Okay, we're going to get an animate accusative singular, but the animate masculines are always going to look like genitives in the accusative. So, мы видим кого? Молодого царя Петра I, то есть Петра Великого, right? Петр I is Петр Великий. 3, власть, power, feminine E noun. This was after the uprising of the riflemen against the power, or we could say the rule, of Peter. Okay? Против, there's a preposition that simply takes the genitive. That's all there is to say about it. So we need the genitive here. Это было после восстания стрельцов против власти Петра. 4, казнь, another feminine E noun. Today is the day of the execution of the Streltsov, the Streltsy. By the way, it just occurred to me that last year, if you remember, we read at the end of Book 2, Akhmatova's Requiem, and somewhere in there there's a reference to the Streletsky zhony, the wives of the Streltsy, who were wailing at the foot of the Kremlin walls about their murdered or executed husbands, right? And so Akhmatova takes that example from earlier in Russian history to talk about the purges and, of course, the execution of her first husband, Nikolai Gumilyov. And so she points to this sort of historical precedent. Anyway, so today is the day of execution, genitive. Сегодня день казни. Казни Streltsov. By the way, look at the word день. That's a soft masculine. Петр их казнит за восстание. Piotr is having them executed for their uprising, for the uprising. 5. Смерть, death, a feminine E noun. Несчастные стрельцы стоят на лобном месте и ждут. Okay, the unfortunate, the wretched riflemen are standing on this lobное место, around it, and awaiting what? Well, this verb ждать, if the thing you're waiting for is here it's not really abstract, but something like an event or whatever it may be, that thing often shows up in the genitive, right? So I guess the easiest way to say this is that the verb ждать often takes a direct object, not in the accusative, but in the genitive. And so anyway, that's what we'd use here. We'd say, они ждут смерти. They're awaiting death. Genitive. 6, конь, right? Soft masculine. Do you see the white horse? Okay, again, this is animate, so the accusative looks like genitive. Вы видите белого коня? Piotr is sitting on this horse and looking at the rifleman. Piotr сидит на этом коне и смотрит на стрельцов. Okay, that's an in-stress noun. Again, if we look this up and we see that konь, the genitive is kanya with that stressed ending, that's telling us that this is an in-stress noun, right? That any ending we add to this is going to be stressed, including here the prepositional, right? He's sitting on this horse. Он сидит на этом коне. 7, злость, hatred, malice. Some riflemen are looking at Peter with malice and hatred. Некоторые стрелцы смотрят на Петра со злостью и ненавистью. Okay, the reason I put this example in here was to get an instrumental singular, right? Remember that these e-nouns, like zloist, they take kind of a funny looking ending in that instrumental singular, right? Soft sign you. And here we have two examples. Со злостью, с ненавистью, right? Instrumental singular. 8. Жизнь, life, that's a feminine e-noun. Стрелецкий бунт – очень важное событие в жизни молодого царя. A very important event in the life, prepositional again, в жизни молодого царя, in the life of the young Tsar. Okay, next topic, let's get an overview of special soft nouns. Again, we went over this yesterday, but because it's such an important topic, we want to lay this out very carefully. Okay, so two things. First off, when we say special soft, we basically mean soft, right? They're soft nouns. These are soft nouns, and for the most part, they look just like ordinary soft nouns. Another thing we can say quickly is that, again, softness isn't some mystery. We can simply look at a noun ending and say, is it hard or soft? Okay, so these are all visibly soft. There's no mystery about that. They act, for the most part, like ordinary soft nouns. They take the same endings. Okay, but the second major point is that there are exceptions, and those are in the black boxes here in the table. Those are the only endings that are different or unexpected if we compare these two ordinary soft endings. So again, it's very important to think of these special soft nouns as separate categories, but at the same time, remember that they're not doing something just crazy with every ending. It's a very limited number of endings, and the most important ones, the most common ones, are those prepositional singulars because they're very common. We have also the dative singular for feminines, but that's not quite as common. But again, it's very important to learn that to master Russian. Okay, one more thing we could say, again, to repeat, special soft feminines, special soft neuters are extremely common. Why is that? Because a lot of borrowed nouns from French, for example, end up as special soft feminines in Russian. There are a ton of special soft neuters because that's how nouns are formed from verbs. We're going to learn how that happens later in Book 3. And finally, as we mentioned, there aren't really very many special soft masculines that are used commonly. Крiterий is one example, but even that isn't a word you hear just every day. So anyway, keep in mind that there aren't that many special soft masculines. Let's fill in a few more blanks now, looking at a different painting, also very important historically, or at least this figure depicted. This is young Saint Sergei. Of course, he's not a saint yet. He's just little Vartholomew. So that was his given name. And then when he was tonsured, he became Sergei. And he went on to become one of the most famous, he became a monk and became a hermit, basically. So what happened here was that, if you were a young monk, you might decide to be a hermit, right? To go off and pray in solitude somewhere in the forest, for example. And in those days, the European Russia was basically covered with forests. And so a young hermit would go off into the forest and live in solitude and pursue prayer, basically. But if he got kind of a reputation for his spirituality or whatever, then some admirers might come and want to live with him and learn from him. And so a little community would gradually build up around him. And that's exactly what happened here with Sergei, right? His little hermitage or hermit's refuge eventually grew into one of the largest and most important monasteries in Russia. It's still there today. It's called Sergiyev Posad. Sergiyev Posad. And you see how it's from the name Sergei. And that's actually how a lot of Russia was settled, at least initially, was, for example, let's say a hermit goes off, eventually a big monastery, a big community grows up, and then certain people in that community, well, they want solitude and they're not going to find it anymore in this large monastery. So they in turn go off somewhere else in the woods, and maybe in time a community builds up there. And so a lot of this forested land in Western Russia was around, Moscow and whatnot, was settled by these monks building monasteries, and then townspeople eventually settling nearby as well. Okay, so anyway, any famous Orthodox saint, including in Russia, is going to have a saint's life, so to speak, right? So this is kind of a literary genre, telling about the miracles, in the saint, in the virtuous deeds and all this stuff in the life of the saint. And these usually extend all the way back to childhood. And the famous story here with young Varfolomey, the future Sergei, was that supposedly when he was a very young man, he saw this mysterious figure clothed in the black garb of a Russian monk. And the monk basically taught him how to read magically, right? So he gave him this gift of being able to read. Of course, Varfolomey was just an illiterate peasant child, right? And so in retrospect, he thought that this strange figure who appeared to him was an angel or some kind of envoy of God. Let's look at some vocab here. A видение, that's related to видеть, right? So that's a vision. This is the видение отроку Varfolomeю, the vision, and here we get a dative to the boy Varfolomey. By the way, otrok is a kind of archaic term. The modern Russian for a boy would be мальчик. Okay, a saint's life is a житие. That's an older kind of Church Slavonic form. Again, you can see it's related to жить, but that's the life of a saint, this literary genre. A saint is a святой. Now you see that's a masculine adjective, so if this were a female saint, she would be a святая. To found, here's a aspectual pair. We haven't talked much about verbs yet, but we'll be reviewing them in a lot of detail here. Основывать, основать, to found something. Основание, that's a verbal noun from основать, so that means the act of founding or the foundation of a monastery, for example. Monastery is monastir. Okay, what gender? Masculine, right? It's soft masculine. Роль, that's a feminine noun. Развитие, development, special soft neuter. And государство, that's a good noun to know. It means the state, like the Russian state. Okay, let's fill in some blanks here. About this vision is written in the saint's life of Saint Sergei. Sergei Radonezhsky he's called. That's how he's normally referred to, Saint Sergei of Radonezh. Okay, about this vision, that's going to be prepositional. Об этом видении, right? There's that special ending we have to watch out for, ee. So is written, пишется в, in the saint's life. Again, this is prepositional singular. We have to be careful. В житии святого Сергия Радонежского. According to this saint's life, this literary text, по житию, right, according to the saint's life, когда Сергий был маленьким, тогда его еще звали Варфоломей. Back in that time, they still called him Varfolomey, когда он был маленьким. Right, note there the instrumental, right? He used to be small. Back when he was small, instrumental. Он увидел ангела. He saw an angel. Okay, ангел, animate, accusative looks like genitive. Он увидел ангела в виде монаха, in the form of a monk, монах. И этот монах научил Varfolomeya читать. This monk taught Varfolomey, again, animate accusative, looks like genitive, to read. Святой Сергий потом основал очень важный accusative монастырь, right? Inanimate accusative. Sergiev Posad, there's the name of the monastery he founded. You can visit it today. It's, a couple of hours by bus or something outside of Moscow. Основание таких монастырей играло очень важную роль в развитии русской культуры и в истории российского государства. The founding of such monasteries, okay, so genitive plural, монастырей. So that's a soft noun, so we're going to expect in genitive plural, yay. Monasterie played a very important role, очень важную роль. Okay, remember rol is a feminine e noun, but remember the rule for feminine accusatives is a to u, ya to you. Since there's no a or ya here, it doesn't change. Важную роль. In the development of Russian culture, в развитии русской культуры и в истории российского государства. So again, there are those prepositional singular endings, и, в развитии, в истории. Okay, let's look at a few special notes on the nominative plural, and I'll try to be quick about this. What are some basic stress shifts in two-syllable nouns? We talked about this last year, so let's just review quickly. Okay, so for two-syllable neuters, we expect in the nominative plural the stress to jump to the opposite syllable. Remember this? So окно in the plural becomes окна. Море becomes моря. Okay, if it's more than two syllables, we expect something similar to happen, but it's not always quite as predictable, right? We expect the stress to jump in the opposite direction, but we're not always sure where it will land. But here's an example, облако, plural, облака. What about feminine nouns? Same thing happens with two-syllable feminines, but only in one direction, right? If the two-syllable feminine starts with stress on the ending, like стена, then the plural, it'll jump back, right, to стены. That's a very reliable rule. It doesn't always work. Again, in Russian, there are usually exceptions to every rule, but that's a very reliable rule. Another example, a soft one, земля becomes земли. You see how it jumps backwards. But it'll never jump in the opposite direction. If we think, for example, kniga, right, the plural of that is not kniги. That's totally weird. You would never see that ever. Okay, one thing to watch out for is that sometimes if the stress jumps backwards, what I call a latent "ua" may reveal itself, right? So, for example, sestra, the plural, we can be confident it'll jump backwards, but instead of getting siestri, we get actually siostri. So we get this latent "ua" rearing its ugly head. Okay, we talked also about in-stressed masculine nouns, right? Those are always stressed on the ending, right? So pretty easy. Tsar, the plural, tsari, stol, stali, slavar, slavari. Why? Because those all happen to be in-stressed masculine nouns. Again, that's something you could tell by looking at the genitive ending in a good dictionary. We'll talk later, especially in book 4, about ways to spot those, but there aren't any rules that are 100% reliable. We'll talk about it more later. Okay, watch out for mobile vowels, right? Now, when you do have a mobile vowel drop out, the stress is going to stay wherever it was, right? Wherever it was with the mobile vowel. So, for example, rot becomes rty. Okay, that's just one syllable. Ветер becomes ветры. Okay, see how it stays put. Орел, орлы, орлы. Okay, now we know that some masculine nouns, this is not predictable, they have their nominative plurals ending in a stressed a, or if it were soft, it would be stressed ya. Again, this is not something you can know by looking at a word. You have to simply learn these as you go and watch out for them and be sure to tag them in your vocab lists or whatever. So again, this ending, wherever it occurs, is always going to be stressed. For example, берег, берега, колокол, колокола, учитель, учителя. Now, one thing that's useful to remember is that we talked about this a lot last year. Anything that's weird in the nominative plural, right? So, for example, here with these stressed "a" endings. So it could be a stress shift in the nominative plural, or it could be some kind of irregularity, like the stem changes or something like this. Usually that irregularity we see in the nominative plural is going to carry over in all of the remaining plural forms. So we'll practice that in a second, but that's something really useful to keep in mind. And one simple example is the irregular noun drug. Remember, in the plural, it becomes druzya. So that's this crazy stem change. But then we see in the remaining forms, genitive plural, druzye, prepositional plural, druzyach, and so forth, right? So we keep this druz thing, stem, in all of the remaining forms. So basically, for the most part, if there's anything funny in the plural, you're going to see that clearly in the nominative plural. Okay, so let's give a few nominative plurals. All of these forms are affected by the things we just mentioned. So let's do this fairly quickly. See how well you can guess these nominative plurals. Volna, wave, volny. Stress jumps backward. Dvorets, fleeting vowel, plural, dvorцы, palaces. Crest, okay, that's an in-stress noun. So crosses, кресты. Четыре, гора, plural, горы, right? It jumps backward. I remember перед этим горем гнутся горы. I've got a requiem on the brain now since we've mentioned, right? Before this grief, the mountains bow, right? Перед этим горем гнутся горы. Okay, пять, берег. Okay, I've tagged that with an asterisk because you have no way of knowing this unless you just remember it. That's going to take stressed a in the plural. So берега is the nominative plural. Шесть, холм, that's an in-stressed noun, so the plural is холмы, холмы. Семь, река, okay, this is easy to guess. Реки, rivers is the plural. Stress jumps back. Купол, okay, that's going to be купола. Девять, цар, that's an in-stressed noun, so the plural will be цари, цари. Десять, город, stressed a, города, города. That's a really important stressed a noun there. You definitely want to know that one. Another one, actually, sorry, we'll see it in a moment. I got ahead of myself. Одиннадцать, поле, okay, two-syllable neuter. We can be sure that plural is going to be almost sure. We can be almost sure that the plural will be поля, поля. 12, fleeting vowel, церкви, церкви, churches. 13, this is an in-stress noun, корабли, корабли. How do you know that? Well, you just have to know, right? Hopefully you remember from the list we saw earlier. 14, поезд. This is the other one I was about to mention a moment ago. Really common. Trains is поезда, поезда. 15, okay, fleeting vowel, стрелец, the plural will be стрельцы. Watch the spelling there. That soft L is preserved with the soft sign. Стрельцы. Day, fleeting vowel, plural is going to be ни. 17, городок, fleeting vowel, plural, городки, right? Little towns, городки. 18, стена, the plural will be стены, стены. Okay, let's look quickly at the genitive plural. This is a really tricky case, so you may remember from last year. Let's review it quickly, right? Genitive plurals for masculines typically end in ov and yev for hard masculines. And then, as you may remember, for feminines and neuters, the basic genitive plural ending is zero ending. So let's look over that zero ending. That can be a bit tricky, right? That basically means we get rid of the a or the o in the nominative singular for feminines and neuters, and we're left with no ending. And sometimes if that would give us a consonant cluster at the end of that zero ending form, a mobile vowel appears. So here are examples of that. Aknoa, the genitive plural isn't orken, orken, right? We have that cluster. We split that up with a mobile vowel. We get orken, orken. Okay, bashnya, genitive plural is bashin. Okay, so mobile vowel coming in. Why do we write yeah? Well, you can think of that as the 5-letter spelling rule, right? We can't have unstressed o after the sh. So we're normally expecting o to be our mobile vowel by default, but because of the spelling rule, that won't always be the case. Sistra becomes sistur, right? There we had that syllable is stressed, and there we get the third possibility for a mobile vowel, your. Remember, we can only have that in a stressed position. Okay, this doesn't always happen. It usually does, but not always. So, for example, volna becomes voln, right? That cluster is not broken up. Oblaka becomes oblakov. Okay, that's just irregular for a neuter. That's very unusual. And here's one more cluster that's not broken up. Likarstva. Genitive plural is likarstv. That's especially weird because we have four final consonants, and you might expect, well, surely that would be broken up, but it's simply not in Russian. Okay, next we have the alternate ending yay. If you remember from last year, some nouns take their genitive plural ending is yay. Okay, so let's quickly review this very important ending. Which nouns do this? Soft neuters, masculines and feminines ending in a soft sign, and also masculine nouns ending in a hushing consonant, right? A sound that makes kind of a consonant that makes a sort of a sh sound. They also tend to take yay. And most nouns that take this yay ending stress that ending. So keep that in mind. Not always, but very often that yay is going to be stressed. So for example, polya, genitive plural, palyay, tsar, tsaryay, ключ. There's a hushing consonant, ключей. Okay, now same, what about special softs? Well, masculines, for example, гений, that's a soft masculine, and it takes what we might expect, гениев, right? Just the soft version of that off ending. Теория and мнение, so special soft feminines and neuters, they actually follow the rule we'd expect, zero ending. The only thing is the spelling may look a little bit funny, right? So if we take теория, we get rid of the final ah sound, we end up with и краткое, теорий, right? Or мнений, right? So that's actually just a zero ending form. Okay, most of the nominative plural stress shifts that we talked about earlier, they carry over again throughout the remaining endings for the most part in the plural, right? So for example, stali, that's an unstressed noun, that's going to be stalov, right? That stress is going to hold up there in the genitive plural. Similarly, poezda, with that stressed ah in the nominative plural, that's going to carry over to the genitive, we get poezdov. But there are some exceptions. Сестры becomes сестер, right? So there are going to be any number of irregularities in these plural forms. Okay, let's practice giving some genitive plurals. Город, городов, right? Города in the nominative, городов in the genitive plural. Река, zero ending, рек. Музей, soft masculine, музеев. Критерий, special soft masculine, критериев. Корабль, soft masculine, кораблей, right? So yay ending there, it ends in a soft sign, we expect yay, and normally that would be stressed. Also with ветвь, right? Ветвей would be the genitive plural. Number 7, ветка, zero ending, веток, right? So we get the mobile vowel coming in, not ветк. You see, it's kind of hard to say that. Веток. 8, земля, that's going to be земель. Okay, that's kind of a tricky one. A little bit irregular maybe in the sense that we get a yeah coming in as our mobile vowel, somewhat unexpectedly, but note how we preserve the softness of the L with that zero ending, земель. 9, море, okay, that's a soft neuter, so we get морей. 10, восстание, восстаний, right? Zero ending, special soft neuter. Étage ends in a hushing consonant, plural, genitive plural, étagей. 12, история, zero ending, историй. Okay, very quickly, we noted already that, again, anything that's happening that's unusual in the nominative plural is going to tend to carry over to all the remaining forms. That could be stress, it could be a change in the stem, and so forth. One further thing to note maybe is that if you have the stressed yay in the genitive plural, that stress is also going to tend to carry over in all the remaining plural forms, even if it's not present in the nominative plural. So you get that with a lot of nouns actually. So let's look here at some examples. Tsar, tsari. So we have an in-stressed noun here, right? Soft noun. So let's just fill in some remaining plural forms like dative, prepositional, instrumental, and we'll see here how the stress remains consistent. К русским царям, а русских tsariach, с русскими царями, right? All in stressed. Стена becomes стены. So we get к высоким стенам, на высоких стенах, за высокими стенами. 3. Города по большим городам, о больших городах с большими городами. Окно becomes окна, к маленьким окнам, в маленьких окнах, под маленькими окнами. See this pattern here, and you see how useful this is, right? It takes a lot of the guesswork out of all these plural forms in the where their stress is going to fall in the plural. 5. Поле becomes поля, right? That stress shift, so we get по широким полям, на широких полях, над широкими полями. 6. Сестра becomes сестры, к младшим сестрам, о младших сестрах, с младшими сестрами. 7. Облако becomes облака, по черным облакам, в черных облаках, с черными облаками. 8. Брат. Okay, here we get the change in the stem. Братья. We get к старшим братьям, о старших братьях, со старшими братьями. Okay, so there you have it. Now check out today's poem if you'd like. Another poem by Fiet with some special soft nouns to get excited about. Anyway, that's it for today. If you need to review certain topics like the genitive plural, that's a very tricky topic. Remember, you can go back and watch last year's video if you want to revisit that in more detail. Anyway, until tomorrow, до свидания, товарищи.